It began with a package that no one saw coming, quietly delivered, carefully assembled, and powerful enough to force investigators to rethink everything they thought they knew. Before officials could even catch their breath, the digital tip exploded across the case, reshaping priorities overnight. And before we go any further, this is the moment to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss first-hand updates on this story and others as they continue to unfold. The anonymous digital tip did not arrive as a loose collection of rumors or half-baked claims. Instead, it came packaged like a professional intelligence brief, structured folders, time-stamped files, clearly labeled metadata, and an internal logic that immediately caught the attention of investigators. According to sources familiar with the matter, this was not the kind of tip that could be casually dismissed or pushed to the bottom of the queue. It demanded immediate attention because of how deliberately it was assembled. At the heart of the submission were multiple forms of digital evidence, video clips, audio recordings, GPS location data, and supporting documentation that appeared to cross-reference itself. Investigators noted that timestamps on the footage aligned with GPS pings, while audio files matched the same temporal windows. This internal consistency raised a critical question early on. Was the sender simply relaying second-hand material, or had they spent considerable time compiling and validating this information before sending it in? What made the tip especially disruptive to the investigation was how it challenged the existing narrative. Up to that point, authorities had been working under a defined set of assumptions based on known witness statements, preliminary forensic results, and publicly available information. The digital tips suggested alternative timelines, unexplored locations, and behavioral patterns that had not been fully examined. In practical terms, this meant resources had to be shifted. Surveillance reviews were reopened, prior witness interviews were re-examined, and investigative teams were reassigned to pursue leads that had previously been considered secondary. Importantly, the anonymity of the sender added another layer of complexity. While anonymous tips are not uncommon, this one stood out due to its sophistication. Law enforcement agencies are trained to treat such submissions cautiously, balancing the potential value of the information against the risk of misinformation or manipulation. In this case, the professionalism of the materials reduced, but did not eliminate, those concerns. Every file still had to be authenticated, every claim verified independently. Still, the impact was immediate. Internal briefings reportedly shifted tone, moving from routine updates to urgent strategy sessions. Investigators began mapping out how the new data intersected with known facts, identifying both points of alignment and areas of conflict. The tip did not provide answers on its own, but it fundamentally altered the questions being asked. From that moment forward, the investigation was no longer confined to its original lanes. It had widened, deepened, and become far more complex. One of the most striking elements in the digital tip was a series of trail camera videos. These were not grainy, indistinct clips pulled from social media. They were clear enough to show movement patterns, body positioning, and timing, captured by cameras positioned near service roads that had previously received limited attention from investigators. Trail cameras are often used by hunters, landowners, and conservationists, designed to activate when motion or heat is detected. In this case, the footage showed a lone figure appearing at specific locations during narrow time windows. The individual's face was not clearly visible, but their presence alone raised questions. Why was someone moving through these areas at those hours? And how did these movements fit into the broader timeline of the case? Investigators immediately began cross-referencing the timestamps with known events. When overlaid with traffic data, cell tower records, and existing witness statements, the footage appeared to align with unexplained gaps. These were moments when official accounts had little clarity about who was where and why. The service roads themselves became a focal point, as they offered discrete routes that bypassed main highways while still connecting key locations. The footage also suggested familiarity with the area. The figure moved confidently, without hesitation, implying prior knowledge of the terrain. This detail mattered because it narrowed the pool of potential individuals who could plausibly navigate those routes in darkness. Investigators reportedly revisited land ownership records, employment histories, and prior interactions with the area to identify who might fit that profile. However, authorities were careful not to overstate the footage's significance. A figure near a service road is not, by itself, proof of wrongdoing. The challenge lay in determining intent and context. Was the person simply passing through, or were they involved in something more consequential? To answer that, analysts began enhancing the footage, examining gait patterns, clothing silhouettes, and even the rhythm of movement to see if it matched known individuals. The trail camera videos did not solve the case, but they provided something invaluable: direction. They pointed investigators toward locations and times that demanded closer scrutiny, transforming previously overlooked stretches of land into critical pieces of the puzzle. Perhaps the most contentious aspect of the digital tip involved phone metadata. According to the submission, location data embedded within device records appeared to contradict public claims about where certain individuals were during key overnight hours. Metadata does not capture conversations or content, but it can reveal when and where a device connected to networks, which towers it pinged, and how it moved across geographic space. Investigators treat such data cautiously, knowing that phones can be left behind, shared, or manipulated. Still, when metadata consistently conflicts with stated whereabouts, it raises serious red flags. In this case, the data allegedly showed movement patterns that did not match public timelines. Devices believed to be stationary appeared to travel, while others that were supposed to be active went silent at crucial moments. The overnight window in question was already considered critical due to a lack of verified sightings and limited corroboration. The metadata added a new dimension, suggesting that the truth of those hours might be far more complex than initially believed. Analysts began reconstructing minute-by-minute movement maps, layering metadata with GPS records and environmental data such as road conditions and travel times. Defense experts often point out that metadata can be misleading if interpreted without context. Investigators acknowledged this, emphasizing that the data alone could not establish guilt or intent. However, its value lay in how it challenged certainty. Statements that had once seemed straightforward now required deeper examination, and individuals who had been considered peripheral suddenly warranted renewed attention. As with all digital evidence, authentication was key. Authorities reportedly sought confirmation from service providers and independent forensic experts to ensure the data had not been altered or misattributed. Only after such verification could it be responsibly used to guide further inquiry. The audio files included in the tip added an emotional and psychological dimension to the investigation. Once authenticated, analysts noted a striking feature: the tone of the voices captured. Rather than panic, confusion, or distress, the recordings were marked by an unusual calmness that seemed inconsistent with the surrounding circumstances. Context matters greatly in audio analysis. Calmness alone is not evidence of wrongdoing, but when placed against the backdrop of what was allegedly occurring at the time, it became unsettling. Experts examined speech patterns, pauses, background noise, and ambient sounds to determine whether the recordings had been edited or staged. Their initial assessments suggested the files were continuous and unaltered. Investigators then focused on what was said and what was not. Certain phrases, or the absence of expected reactions, stood out. Analysts compared these recordings to known behavioral baselines, considering how individuals typically respond under stress. While no definitive conclusions were drawn, the recordings raised enough concern to warrant deeper scrutiny. Human observation added another layer to the growing digital picture. Neighbors began describing late-night movements, vehicles arriving or leaving, doors opening, faint sounds that had previously seemed insignificant. When aligned with the digital timelines emerging from metadata and video, these accounts took on new meaning. Witnesses emphasized that their recollections were not prompted by the tip itself, but by follow-up interviews that asked more specific questions. This refinement in questioning often helps surface details that were overlooked during initial inquiries. The consistency between independent testimonies strengthened the credibility of the emerging timeline. Specially trained K-9 units were deployed to test physical pathways suggested by the new evidence. According to reports, scent trails appeared to break abruptly, a pattern often associated with vehicle transitions. In some areas, dogs showed interest in spots that suggested possible staging rather than natural movement. Canine evidence is interpretive, not definitive, but it can provide powerful corroboration when aligned with other findings. In this case, it reinforced the idea that movement patterns were more complex than initially assumed. A small but critical forensic discovery involved a fragment of blanket recovered during the investigation. Laboratory analysis detected diesel residue and soil composition inconsistent with the immediate area. These findings suggested contact with vehicles or locations not previously associated with the scene. Forensic experts emphasize that trace evidence often tells a story of movement, where an object has been, not just where it was found. This discovery prompted investigators to widen their geographic focus. Digital forensic teams identified patterns consistent with bonaphone usage and encrypted messaging. While such tools are not illegal, their presence in proximity to critical events raised questions. Investigators sought and obtained warrants to examine devices and communications, focusing on timing and coordination rather than content alone. As the investigation intensified, prosecutors moved to secure evidence proactively. Obstruction-related measures were authorized to prevent data deletion, device tampering, or interference with custody chains. These steps signaled the seriousness with which authorities viewed the emerging findings. Despite the growing body of information, officials repeatedly stressed one central principle: evidence only matters if it stands up in court. Every file, statement, and trace must be corroborated and authenticated. Investigators warned against drawing conclusions prematurely, underscoring that the legal process demands rigor, not speculation. The picture now emerging is not one built on a single dramatic revelation, but on convergence. Digital data, human testimony, forensic science, and investigative discipline are slowly aligning, reshaping how this case is understood. What began as an anonymous tip has evolved into a catalyst, forcing deeper questions, stricter scrutiny, and a renewed commitment to uncovering the truth. As authorities move forward, one thing is clear: every claim will be tested, every assumption challenged, and every piece of evidence weighed with care. The outcome will not be decided by noise or speculation, but by what can be proven when it matters most.